back to Great Northwest Weaponry. This is Thomas, and today we are finally doing the demo of my World War II Browning FN High Power. This is a beautiful example of this gun, and one that I am super excited to have in my collection. Another acquisition from my friends at the War Front, and we got a lot of history to talk about here. This is, as far as I'm concerned, John Moses Browning's magnum opus. So let's go ahead and hop over to the gun room and talk some Browning high power history.
Before we get too far into talking about the history, I want to make sure to give my friends at the War Front a shout out for providing both ammo for this video and a pair of aftermarket magazines for this pistol. These are both 13 round mags made to the original specifications, and this particular example turns out really needed them because the original mag that came with this does not want to cycle for nothing, but with these it cycles quite well most of the time. So go ahead and set those aside. Also has this nice original holster come with it. Can barely read the stamp on the back of it, but it is a 45 dated holster here. So cool little additional bits of goodness coming with it. Now, the history of the Browning High Power, the vaunted BHP, this one being, again, an FN made example, and what the Germans would call the Pistole 640B. Now, this is a late example, what would be sometimes referred to as the fingerprint model, this largely because of this divot right here that looks like a thumbprint. I've heard it called fingerprint model and or thumbprint model. But also, this is a little cautionary thing here. This is why you should not rely on Wikipedia for information. If you look at Wikipedia, which I often do, and then double check any and all sources that I read, I found a few good articles on the Browning, is where I got most of my information, and a lot of Wikipedia was correct, but it does state on Wikipedia that the thumbprint is on the left side of the gun, and as you can clearly see, it isn't. It is, in fact, on the right side of the gun. So, like I said, don't just trust Wikipedia blindly. Anybody can edit it, and oftentimes the edits are wrong. So, now officially getting into the historical side of this pistol and how it came to be. Starting in the early 20th century, the French wanted a new pistol, and they wanted it to hold 15 rounds. After World War I ended, the person who kind of took this on as his endeavor was a Belgian gun designer working for Fabrique Nationale, or FN, and I'm going to butcher this name because I cannot speak or pronounce French words to save my life, but WWII. I'm going to type it down over here so you can see and gauge for yourself how badly I murdered that. But he began work on a magazine design, which he would present once completed to John Moses Browning, who also was doing work with FN. He did a total of 60 transatlantic trips to visit his office in Liège, Belgium, where Fabrique Nationale was located. And I can feel my tongue revolting against these French words. But using the pistol magazine design, Browning would design two separate pistols, just from the ground up, incorporating this new magazine. One being a straight blowback, the other one a tilting barrel blowback. The tilting barrel would be the one that he would go with. A lot of test trials were done, and he would apply for a patent on this in 1923, but sadly the patent itself would not be granted until February 22nd of 1927, when he had unfortunately already passed away on September 26th of 1926, less than 3 months earlier. Now, the patent would be for what you see before us, but with the tangent sight, of which we'll get a bit more into that when we go to the tabletop, some of the little details to look at. I'd already mentioned the thumbprint, so probably won't go over that again. But when we're looking at how to date a specific model of these, there's some funny little details that we'll definitely get into more of the design progression over the course of the German occupation. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. After Browning passed, but the patent was granted to Fabrique Nationale, WWII would then continue work on the design until it was ready for production in 1934. Now, all of this was done basically to provide a new pistol for the French, but the French spurned FN and Saïve and John Moses Browning for a while, and would wind up, based on the trials that they had witnessed and what they'd learned from them, designing their own pistol, the Mas 1935. This would not stop FN from producing the Browning high power, of which the patent was under a pair of French words, either grand rendement or grande puissance. Again, I don't speak French. This is all just sad attempts, but this literally translates to high power, of which is where we get the name. That is what the pistol patent application was labeled as. So now we have the classic name, and the pistol is now in production. The first to adopt this would be the Belgian army itself, and a number of other countries would adopt them. Peru, Lithuania, Estonia, even France would eventually buy a few, and somewhere around 70,000 were built and shipped by the time the Germans invaded. The Blitzkrieg hit Belgium in May of 1940, and by June, FN was producing high powers once again, but now under German occupation as what the Germans called the, as we previously mentioned, Pistole 640B. They also had their workforce massively boosted by slave labor. There were about 4,000 employees when the Germans took control of Liège. By the time you get a ways into production, they had, I think the high number was 12,000, all supplemented by non-Belgian slave labor that the Germans had just kind of foisted upon them. And over the course of 1940 to the Belgian liberation in September of 1944, or specifically the liberation of Liège in 1944, some 319,000 Browning high powers were made for the Wehrmacht. They went through a number of evolutions over the course of this time, of which I think we're going to go ahead and transition here to the tabletop to take a look at that. Before we do, there were high powers in Allied service in World War II as well. I would love to get myself one of these, the Canadian-made for both themselves and for the British, Inglis high powers. And the Warfront, where I picked this up, when I purchased it, had one of those as well, and I was super torn on which one I wound up getting, but how pretty this bluing pattern is ultimately is what won me over, and the fact that this one came with a holster. But now, let's go ahead, take a look at the tabletop, do disassembly, and look at various markings and other small tweaks that were done to this gun over the course of its production under occupation.
Got a few features to look at here before we start the disassembly. First off, we're going to talk about the sight configuration. 1940, 1941, 1942, during the occupation, they would have used the tangent sight configuration. This is the fixed sight configuration that picked up in 1942 and continued until the liberation in 1944. I have also mentioned this kind of beautiful pattern of bluing. Now, I have here my Walther P38, and you can see it's almost the reverse, this kind of plum bluing on the frame, and then the slide is more of a black, whereas you have kind of the plum on the slide with this, and then the black for the frame. It is very common, especially as you get deeper into the war, 42 for this, 44 for this, for bluing to be mismatched as different parts were done in batches and then matched together. So you would have, you know, the slides could, a whole handful of them, be this kind of plum color, and then the frames all come out a different color as they didn't have the availability for the proper salts and everything to have the exact same mixture for every stage of the process. So that is where you get these really cool pairings like you see here. Now, going to markings and identifying exact year. We went over the sights already. Somewhere in 1942 is when they switched to tangent sights. There are two different Waffen codes that were used for this, and these can be seen here and here. This one is a WAA 140, of which they started using in 1941. The earlier 1940 examples going a ways into 41 would have been WAA 613. These ones also mostly were put together from leftover commercial parts, so serial number range would line up with commercial serial number ranges. Starting in 1941, they picked up with serial number 95,000 and continuing until somewhere around 135,000 would be your initial WAA 140s with the tangent sights. Picking up in 42, they continued until somewhere around 150,000, give or take, but they had switched to the fixed rear sight and the Waffen code stayed the same. Now, 43 to 44, of which is the range that this one falls in, I'm going to tell you why I'm fairly certain that this is a 1943. You started adding for the serial number, of which would be on this side, here, here, and here, pretty nicely lined up so you can see if it's matched at a glance. And this one, luckily, is, considering these are not cheap at all. But these ones would have a letter suffix, A or B. A ran from number 01A to 99999A. The B suffix, of which this is, ran from 01B to 6300B. This one is in the 50 range, so very definitely 1944. This thing maybe saw like a couple of days of service or maybe a week or two, but somewhere around 6300B is where the liberation happened. Now, we're going to take a look at disassembly. It is extremely modern. We're going to drop our mag, set that aside, and then we're going to, on this second notch here, lock open the slide. Now, this retaining bar can be pushed out from the back. You need to make sure that it's kind of up there. So you can see right there, nothing is happening while I'm pushing from the back. Push up and then push on that side, and it pulls right out. Now, this is under spring pressure, so let go, and then everything slides off the top. Go ahead and pull our recoil spring and guide rod out, and we'll need to be careful of the orientation of this when we reinsert it. And then the barrel just lifts up and pulls out. And that is all she wrote. Very simple. Now, putting this back together, go ahead and put our spring back on our guide rod. This needs to be sitting like that when you reinsert it. So barrel in gun, put our spring back in that hole there, and again, making sure that it's in the proper orientation, which should be as seen there. I hope that's what I said earlier, but this is the direction that it should be facing. Now we can put this back on the gun, and we're going to want to lock this again. Take our disassembly bar and put it back in. It just pushes straight in. It's pretty simple. Now we can drop it, put our mag back in, and that is all she wrote. Let's go ahead and take this back out to the range and do another round of firing.
Loading and unloading the high power is extremely modern. If you know anything about semi-automatic handguns, you'll be able to figure it out. It is a button right next to the trigger guard there. 13 round box mag just simply drops out. This is my original mag, but as we discussed, this seems to have a bit of trouble cycling on the original mag. I do have some modern replacement mags, of which it seems to cycle with just fine. As we often do, we're going to go ahead and test out the safety, which is just this little switch right at the back of the frame there. See if that works. Yep. Then switch it off, and now 13 rounds. Jammed on the last one. And of course we missed it. But still, such a cool piece. I would strongly argue that the high power is the best pistol of the Second World War. And some people might go, oh, you just call it the best right after a jam. Well, this one is at least 80 years old, so I think we can give it a pass. For that matter, it's at least 81 years old at this point, as we are now in 2026. That's weird. Really cool piece. Really cool piece. Really glad to have this. You know, definitely one of the higher dollar pistols in my vintage collection. And just, you know, as I've said, John Moses Browning's magnum opus, one of the more influential guns ever made, and at least if not the most influential that he made, then second only to the 1911. So, hope you all enjoyed. It's been Thomas with Great Northwest Weaponry, and I'll see you next time. I lied. I have 5 shots left in the box, and I intend on ending on a hit today. And there it is. Only 3 out of 5, but ended on a hit. Now get out of here.